This is episode number 3 of Usawa Talks. I am Smita Sahai, the founder and editor-in-chief of Usawa Literary Review. And joining us today are authors Rupleena Bose and Rohit Manchanda, both academics, both novelists. Rupleena's book, The Summer of Then, and Rohit's latest novel, The Enclave, interestingly, both have women protagonists who are dealing with love, loss, and overall life in city and urban spaces. I could go on and talk a lot about them and their accomplishments, but I think for today's purposes, let's first get into a conversation with them. This talk is on masculinities and femininities, or gender roles, or the idea of genders within the character development of contemporary Indian English fiction. Welcome, Rupleena. Welcome, Rohit.
Thank you very
Thanks.
much, Smita.
Thanks, Smita. It's wonderful to be here on
Thank
this very rainy day.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
thank you. It's raining
absolute,
across
absolute.
both the metropolises.
Mm. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for arranging this, especially the theme. The theme is so very interesting.
Yeah. I think it's for once, like it's raining across cities, like Delhi and Bombay being connected with rain is like something I would never
Really,
imagine. That too in August end, I think, for Delhi.
honestly,
Bombay, yeah.
it's a
Yeah.
rare day. It's a
Yeah.
rare day. Yeah, yeah.
Mm.
So, may I request both of you like to talk a little bit about your writing journeys? You're both academics. You both have full-time jobs, and yet, you're also authors of these beautiful, very powerful books, very contemporary books. Tell us a little bit about how writing came to be. How do you manage your writing routine with your full-time jobs and lives?
Rohit, please, why don't you start?
Oh, all right. Thank you. Well, I, uh, I suppose it's a balancing act one needs to do. The reason that I write is because the urge to write is irrepressible, and somehow or the other, I have to find the space, the time, the resources to do it. As Rupleena would agree, I think jobs all consuming. They can be very creative and inventive about throwing things at you uh, that just occupy all of your time. Uh, for instance, when I sometimes foresee a weekend that seems to be really clear, and I'm relishing the prospect of, let's say, devoting that weekend to my writing. Um, the nearer I get to the weekend, the more I find it's getting cluttered up with something or the other, some contingency or the other arising. And it need not just be the job, it could also be life in general. So life also has an ineluctable way of crowding you in with all sorts of happenings and so on. And what I have to do is to just eke out whatever time I can in order to, first of all, give thought to what I wish to write, and second, get down to setting it down. One of the chief impediments in all of this is finding enough time even for thought. I think uh, one needs to. I mean, I certainly need to immerse myself in. Uh, I won't say plotting because my novels are not about plot at all, but about things that we might be talking about today, such as character, such as setting, such as uh, the evolution of somebody's life space. And for that, I find that unless I can immerse myself in my thoughts, in my imagination, for at least 3 or 4 hours at a stretch, I don't really get anywhere. Now, I might be fussier than others about this sort of thing, but that's how it is. And uh, were it not for this absolutely, you know, indefatigable sort of urge to write, I don't think I would get much writing done. So it's this inner fire that propels me really, and gets me somehow to balance the demands of work and life in general with the writing that I wish to do. Uh, I think I'll pass this on to Rupleena now.
I think Rohit and mine, I have to say, it's so nice to actually meet another writer who's also an academic with a full time job. From like, and then you know how you're juggling, but it is exactly what he said, that it has to be like really like a very very like a blazing fire, because everything else tells you that not to write anyway. I mean, will not give you the time, the permission, the mindset, the bureaucracy, the grading. And also I think one thing about being academics, and I'm sure any all academics, particularly I teach literature, so while I'm always talking about literature, I'm always talking about books, it also takes a lot from you. Sometimes you have said it all and there's nothing to write. There is always that danger. And the other danger is, like, sometimes you're so overcritical that, or not over, maybe one can say, you are, because you're a critic as well, right? You're analyzing the texts and you're criticizing them, and you're looking at writing in a particular way, that you're not able to create something new yourself. It's always a danger for academics, literature teachers, film people. So I think that is one hurdle which, I imagine a lot of people, we have lesser novelists who are academics in India. That's what I feel. Much more would be across the world. Almost everybody would have. And I'm not talking about somebody who goes into teaching after the novel is done. I'm also talking about somebody who's already in that space. So you have your job, you have vacation, you have all of those things. So I think it's always difficult to get out of that space, because teaching is also, there's a lot of, you're constantly giving, you're taking things, ideas from class. I mean, taking, in the sense, you're listening to your students and unlearning, but you're also giving a very large part of yourselves in the text that you're teaching and the classroom space that you're engaging with. So I think that is one thing. But the other thing being that I always wanted to be a writer. Earlier I used to write films, essentially for my partner, for several years. And then I had several stories, which I was thinking will be made into a film form. And then I remember one friend saying, but why are you just focusing on films? You have such nice stories. You should just write novels. And I thought that, okay. But then I thought exactly the same thing, that, oh my God, how will I get the time frame to write a novel, which is that that long a narrative, and you have to, like, sit down for 3 to 4 hours to concentrate, get into that space, because you also have classes to take. And then it so happened in my case that I went on PhD leave, for my doctorate, which was a longish leave. And actually, before, I said, okay, now is the time. Before I do my PhD, I'm going to write the novels. So that's when I actually crafted one and another. So I had, like, this whole thing, and then I did my PhD. And then, of course, thankfully, there was pandemic teaching and all of that happened. So I got a fair bit of break from the everyday city life as well. I was in a village, which there was nothing at that time in the village. I mean, even the shop there was one stationery shop, one kirana shop. So, it was that lack which actually made me productive at that point of time, I think, which sort of brought out everything. So I think that is the, yeah, specificity of the situation of being an academic and a writer. It's definitely not easy. You have to have, like, yeah, like, extreme, like, need to want to write to actually get there, I would say.
Yeah, it's compulsion, right? You can't
Yeah,
you
there's no
can't get to
choice.
sleep
Yeah,
otherwise.
yeah, there's
It's
no
not
choice. I
a
mean, it
choice.
doesn't
Yeah,
matter. Yeah,
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 yeah. I don't think there's any other way of being a writer as well, because
yeah,
I mean, more and more, there's also this discourse, and also the publishers would say that it's pretty thankless being a writer. We completely disagree rather
yeah,
strongly. But you're absolutely right that the world doesn't make it easier. Our lives don't make it easier to write. Um,
yeah. But then
so
I think they're not supposed to make it easier. I think that
yeah,
that difficulty, the hurdle, is something that it just comes on the page at one level.
yeah,
I've seen that with myself, at least.
yeah.
I'll probably, like, a cushion thing might not just work for me.
True.
I mean, this adversity and this limited time and all of that. I think that sort of, like, pushes me to get my voice out for me,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah. And
Mm.
also, that urgency sort of forces that, you get the most hidden and the sharpest version out of the
Mhm.
of the truth that you're trying to tell. Yes,
Right,
Rohit?
right.
That's right, and it's certainly the case that the more the world so impends on you, the more you feel that you need to push back and do something that, in a way, will carve out your own identity. I mean, I feel that I have an I wish to have an equal identity as a writer, um, and not just an identity as a scientist, let's say, or an academic. And I can't afford somehow uh, to let that other identities just slip away through my fingers. I mean, one just has this one life, and
Yeah.
one needs to say to oneself, well, I did the best I could. At least say that to oneself, no matter the circumstances. And fortunately, I suppose over the years, one is able to eke out some time here or there or the other. Uh, but that's one of the reasons that my arc of writing and publishing novels has been so very sporadic and, well, sparse as well. It's just two novels. The second one came out after a glorious hiatus of 26 years after the first. And I did write other novels in the meantime. Some of them just couldn't get anywhere. Some of them got abandoned. This is also another sort of inner trouble that besets me, that I start working on ideas and abandon them. I don't think they're good enough, or they don't stay with me. So there are some four or five, I think, novels that I've also started and then uh, just put on the back burner, thinking, can't take this forward, come back to it, and then finally you come across something, an idea suggests itself to you that stays with you, and you can see yourself pushing it through to completion, and then then you see that gleam of possibility, light at the end of the tunnel, when the novel that you're writing actually speaks to you and says, come, push me to the end now,
Yeah.
and will not be denied. The novel itself will not be denied its full length. Uh, yeah. So, and it's interesting, very interesting what you say, Rupleena, about how being uh, a faculty member in an English department, teaching, researching English, actually can be a kind of an impediment to your writing, to your creative writing. Because I think at large, the world would think otherwise.
Yeah.
People, by and large, would say, well, that's a huge edge to have, huge advantage that you enjoy, where your working life funnels into your writing life, let's say. You get that many more ideas than other people in other professions might. You get that much more stimulation from your students as well, from the reading that you do and so forth. But I have heard other people in English literature and so say this, that in fact it constitutes a hurdle, not not a tailwind, more of a headwind. So it's interesting to hear you corroborate that.
Yeah. But that's what, like, you can see it and I can see it. I know how it funnels. I don't think any other job would have made it possible. But that's
Hmm.
because you and me are seeing it as a writer. And
Yes.
everybody who's saying that, I could have written. And it's also because maybe you have to get out of, you have to trust yourself to be a bad academic. Like, I joke that I'm a bad academic. I did whatever was necessary. I did my PhD. I'm not, I did on music. In fact, everybody said, how can you do it on music? I said, I will do it on music. I will do what I
Hmm.
wish. So you also, so because at one level, you don't want to, I mean, at least if you're a writer, that's not what you're looking at. You're looking at your own, need to find the voice, need to find the untold story. That's why my doctorate was on music. And I don't write papers with, I mean, I write whatever is necessary. I wrote, now I don't. Papers which are necessary and which are more accessible. So, an academic, you have to allow yourself to maybe be not the best academic to be a writer. So
Yeah.
to me, it's a choice. If you're in literature, if you're a literature person, because otherwise you'll only look at how, problematic something is. You won't let the story, uh, you know find its own path, because
Mm.
finally the story will find its own path, that, like you said, they will find the tunnel and they will find the light, and you can do whatever, you just have to sit in front and let it just reach the end.
Yeah, let
But that
yourself
you
be the
yeah,
leader.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, you have to allow that to happen. But if you're critical at every point, oh, this is not as good as Virginia Woolf, it won't be, I guess, it's a different time and space, then you'll never reach that point. And I was like, yeah. So you have to, like, I think, have that faith, I guess, and
Yeah.
the ability to be imperfect. I think you have to allow yourself to be imperfect, I think, as
Right.
a
Right.
right.
Absolutely.
That's a beautiful thought, I think, for all artists.
Yeah, yeah,
Ability, the permission to be imperfect.
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
And also that mountain, writing and starting a novel, I think it's like really climbing a mountain. It's that is one thing. And if you think of other things, then you just have to climb the mountain. I think that's the other thing about, I mean, maybe there are hurdles, maybe the mountain is unclimbable, nobody has ever done it before, doesn't matter, you climb the mountain, midway if you fall, you'll probably
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
fall. I
It's
think.
it's your mountain to climb.
Yeah,
Nobody
yeah,
else's.
yeah. So that is where I think the academic or the critic has to just, like, disappear, and the writer has to come in, because it's a tall task. Yeah,
Yeah.
but it's also lovely.
There's another similarity between both of you. In both your novels, the protagonist is a woman, you know.
Yeah.
And in Rupleena's case, you're a woman, you've written a woman character, very nuanced woman character. But in Rohit's case, it's extremely, you know, sort of not the most natural, the most no, expected. It's an unexpected choice, Rohit, because your first novel, Speck of Coal Dust. It leads with it deals with boys' psychology. It is a coming of age novel of for boys,
Mm.
right? It's
Mm.
a very
That's right.
masculine, yeah.
It's a
It's
Yes.
great title, by the way. I saw it and I thought, what a lovely title, A Speck of Coal. It just says so many things, no, about
Yes, yes.
Thank
society
you.
And
and
Thank you.
I am
everything. Yeah.
very deeply connected to that novel because Rohit also grew up for some time around the coalfields of Jharkhand. And for me
Oh,
also, that subject remains very, very close to my heart. The Charia coalfields and the other
Jhapia
coalfields.
Coalfield. Oh.
And that's where this novel is set, A Speck of Coal
Mm.
Dust.
Yeah,
Mm.
I read. I'm planning to read it. I have it on my Kindle now. I'm going to read it. And I've been to I've been to Raniganj. I've been to Jhari. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
As a
yeah. So
kid,
it's the
maybe.
same, it's the
The close,
same,
same
it's
landscape.
the
Ah,
same coalfields. Yes.
oh,
One
okay.
Mm.
ends, the other starts. They all have different names, but it's the
Uh-huh.
same, I think, the
Oh,
same,
okay.
structure of
Dhan,
coal.
Dhanbad also I've been. Yeah.
I grew up, I was born and brought up in Dhanbad.
Oh, how wonderful.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I want to ask you, so Ruplina, of course, you haven't named your protagonist, right? She's an unnamed character.
Yeah, yeah.
And Rohit's protagonist is called Maya, who's in her 40s, newly divorced, and she is gone on the adventure of love. Uh,
Oh, nice.
right. So that's the other thing. I wanted to hear both of you talk about the idea of femininity. What what constitutes the contemporary woman in an urban space? What does her love life look like? What does her idea of herself look like? I mean, it's great to see both of you, chatting. So I think I'll just leave both of you with this. Please, just talk about your idea of femininity, and then how that led to the characters that you've drawn.
So, one of the things that I felt that was when I was, having read, I have to, like, say that I taught Virginia Woolf for many years. Of course, like, I read James Joyce, and I loved Dickens, Great Expectations, Hard Times. So they were all coming of age novels. They were also novels about men wanting to be artists and writers. And then when I read Elena Ferrante, I wondered, why don't we have a contemporary female character like this, who's just not, I mean, she's not the most likable person, but she's also real, and she's constantly making mistakes. So basically, I also, so when I was thinking of this protagonist, was also like, I wanted a woman who's of today's world, and who is, who is in that moment of, what do I say, dilemma between what she wants to be and what the society wants her to be. and at the same time somebody who's observing the world for a length of time, which is why I choose a decade. And to me, obviously, a temporary teacher, and obviously being a teacher myself, a temporary literature teacher's character seemed like a perfect character. Somebody who's observing, who is like, who's sort of like, there's so many things you're observing, you're looking at, and yet you have a voice, and yet that's not where you want to be. You want to be an artist, but you can see what is happening in terms of class. So I think these are the factors, these are the questions which sort of brought me to this character, to the contemporary woman's character. And also, I had a name. I did have a name when I was starting out, but when I'd written the whole thing, I realized that twice the name is coming. And I thought, how many times, if I am telling you a story, if I am writing something in a first person, how many times does one's name comes? Like introductions. And here, that's why I thought, like, other than the introduction part of meeting a new person, the name is not important, because it could be like an every man, like an every woman, like philosophically, like it could be anybody. And that's how I did away with the name, because it could be like any young, young to older. 25 to 35 is the age span, so it could be any girl of that time who's grappling with a large amount of change which is taking place in society, like the crux of modern to hyper modern, yet internet, all of those things, I think. Yeah. Yeah, now I think Rohit can
Okay.
go on.
No, thanks. And it's so very interesting that you take a protagonist who uh, who's thinking about life in the 2010s up to the early 2020s, and she's in the age bracket, as you say, perhaps 25 to 35, something like that. Because Maya, the Enclave's protagonist, well, she's a kind of prequel to that. So the Enclave is set in the mid 2000s,
Yeah, I saw that.
between
Yeah.
about 2006 and 2009. And so it leaves off just at the point that your unnamed protagonist takes over, so to speak. And Maya, although the journey in the novel is those 3 or 4 years, she reflects on the transformations that she has undergone over the 20 years prior, especially the 10 or 15 years prior to that. So the novel's expanse, the temporal expanse, is really around the mid 90s, early 90s to the mid 2000s. So
Fascinating
fascinatingly,
era to actually look at.
I thought
Yeah.
fascinatingly this is a kind of a prelude to the life space of your protagonist. And the reason that I came up with Maya and the early and the mid 2000s as a setting is because I found that an extremely fascinating time to be in when I looked back on it. There was such a sea change in very many things around me then, including, for instance, the circumstances that surrounded us. There was economic liberalization, which had started a decade back, but came into full force during
Yeah.
those years, as I see it. And along with economic liberalization, there was a great deal of opening of social mores all at once. A lot of
Yeah.
shackles were broken, fetters were struck off. People, by and large, could be more themselves, than the sort of people that society expected them to be. And I think this worked much more in these sorts of ways for women than it did for men, because after all, women had been constrained to a much greater degree before all this happened. And this came as a breath of fresh air. And women, I think, made a great deal more of it than men do, in terms of just lapping it all up, seeing what they could do with the newfound freedoms that they had, expressing their individuality, expressing their desires in the sorts of life spaces that they carved out for themselves, and taking extremely bold decisions. This is another thing that
Absolutely.
really stood out for me. During those years, I was quite astounded sometimes to see the sorts of decisions that women took for themselves, full of grit, full of metal, saying, the life that I have lived until now has been meaningless. I need to have another identity for myself. I need to have another life world for myself, and I'm going to just chuck everything else in and make my way into this other world that is now beckoning, and that actually was shut off to me before this. That sort of thing. As
Absolutely. Yeah.
and as Smita very nicely said, Maya goes on a journey of love. Uh, and I would just add to that, saying that she actually goes on a journey of exploration of what
Absolutely.
it
Yeah.
means, what it means to be in love with several people at once. Let's say several men at once. So it's what we now call polyamory, and in those days,
Right.
perhaps it didn't really have a name. Um, you know, all that would be said of such women was that they might, promiscuous or something like that, and were. But so she embarks on this journey where until about the early 2000s, she's been married and she's led a really cloistered life. Uh, in her marriage as well as before her marriage, led the sort of really, really cloistered existence that many girls actually were compelled to lead through the 80s and the 90s. And then her marriage dissolves, and but that's for various reasons. But she finds herself now in this space where she can sample more of existence, sample more of life around her. And one of the things that she discovers is, rather belatedly, that she in fact enjoys the company of men more than the company of women. It's a discovery
Yeah.
that comes to her at age 35 and beyond. You know, she finds that well, she's always been confined to the company of women by and large, except for this rather loveless marriage that she was in, and so she knew no better. But once she's able to sample the joys of being, with men of very, very different stripes as well, very different characters, she finds a thrilling discovery, and she finds that she actually is getting along a lot better with them. Um, so, I think the mid 2000s were a time that saw a lot of women being experimental about their lives, and having the openings and having the latitude, the social latitude to be able to carry out those experiments. So
It's like she was liberated suddenly. It's also a be getting liberated, and you can expand your
absolutely
space,
getting
right?
liberated.
Yeah.
But the other thing that I've explored in my novel is that, well, liberation, for all its charms and
Yeah.
for all its blandishments, can also have its somewhat grayer side, if not darker side. Sometimes it can have a
Yeah.
darker side as well when you start to experiment and you find that you're doing the wrong kind of experiment. So
Yeah.
Maya also ends up in relationships that, prove a little perilous for her, and she ends up in relationships also that prove not satisfying, and she then has to rethink her course, rethink the trajectory that she is fashioned for herself. But I'll not speak about that for now. But uh, just to say that these are the reasons for which I thought I'd talk about a woman, write about a woman in that era, trying, finding that she can express herself finally, finding the means to do so, and then ending up perhaps in another place.
Right, right, yeah. I mean, where you begin and then where you end is something, very different, of course, in the journey of a
Yes.
character, I think. Yeah.
Actually wanted to ask, how would you relate to your own characters if you met them in real life? I mean, would you be friends? Would you just want to watch them from a distance? Um, what would your relationship be like? What would they make you feel? So I understand that Rohit sort of felt that, women had been cloistered for so long. And he used the backdrop of liberation to actually, take us through the liberation of a woman, the real. And in your case, Rupleena, it's basically, the contemporary struggles of a woman that, that you've been through. So if you saw these women like Maya, or the protagonist and narrator in The Summer of Then,
Summer of Then.
yes, how would they make you feel? I mean, if they came up in 3 dimensions, flesh and blood.
They are flesh and blood people, if you ask me. I mean, I will, like, I'll vouch for them. And also, I think, particularly with Summer of Then, I would say that, there are little things that you see of people. At least I do that, and I take little bits from, particularly with Summer of Then. There are bits of it in real people. It's just that it's split. Like one small character trait from one person to another person, which I'm sure every writer is doing. Like, it's, I mean, what is fiction but your, I don't know, your sort of molding of reality and adding something to it. It's like your own cake with a mix of ingredients and a recipe you don't know, I think. So that way, I would say that there are flesh and blood people. You would find them everywhere. But I also feel like, for example, there's this one character whose name was somebody I didn't even know. It was somebody. Man Friday. There's one character who has a very interesting name. The name is Dharamdev. And so all my friends, when they were like, "You used that name," and I said that yes, it was a great name, and I give that character, and it's a totally imaginary character, nothing. But that person is so flesh and blood for me, because that I heard this name from someone. He was a friend's Man Friday, in fact, and I remember thinking that, oh my God, what a strange name, what an odd name. It's not an odd name. I don't know why I thought Dharamdev was an odd name, and it stuck with me, and I kept thinking, why would somebody name this person Dharamdev? What would be, and he'd come, and that's all I knew about him, that it was a Man Friday, and it was like Dharamdev will come and this will happen. And that's when but to me, he's one of my favorite character in Summer of Then. And he is like a completely real person, and I believe I'm sure he's out there. But I don't know whether I'll ever meet him or not. I don't think I will ever meet him. And regarding some of the other characters, of course, like several of the characters that you imagine are, I mean, they're just sort of lost somewhere in this whole, like magnitude of humanity, right? And you only meet them in a novel. I think that's the beauty of a novel. Otherwise, you won't even notice sometimes. Yeah, that's the best I can answer about this.
Even I love Dharamdev.
Yeah, you did. See, how nice.
Yeah. He's an unusual but a very warm human being.
Yeah.
And with a very uncommon backstory, Dharamdev.
Yeah. And which was entirely.
Yeah, and you've sketched it out really, really nicely, the backstory, without dwelling too much on it. But well, and that sort of, I suppose, that sort of thing informs your stance towards him as well. He's such a gentle character, such an understanding character. Having been through the kinds of things he's been through, he could easily have turned out otherwise. He could have turned out hostile, or he could have turned out just very resentful of what's happened to him, gripey and so on. But that's very nicely etched out, I think, character.
Yeah, but I admit that the name was something that I had heard this name before. I mean, so that is one thing that that was there. So a lot of friends who knew that person, and we've always heard the Man Friday's name from the friend, and they would, when they were reading, they called me at Dharamdev's point. They were like, "You used that name?" I'm like, "I did. Kill me." And they were like, "But it's wonderful. It's wonderful. So it's okay." Yeah. So that's what. Yeah, Rohit, please.
I think with Maya, I'll just focus on her as being the chief protagonist of the novel. One's own outlook on things changes with time. One's own stance on things changes. And had I met someone like Maya, let's say 20 or 25 years ago, I might actually have felt a bit threatened, because I wouldn't have come across someone like that, perhaps at all, until then.
Mm-hmm.
And she might seem to me, just a little too independent, a little too autonomous, a little too wild, perhaps, for me to be able to stomach that sort of persona. But today, were I to come across someone like that, I'd think, well, I'd actually be envious. And the reason
Mm.
I'd be envious is because I'd find it captivating that they're let's say, carving this kind of life out for themselves.
Also,
Uh,
her
and
choices,
sorry,
the bold choices.
yes, the world of choices, and
I mean, her
one reason that
choices. Yeah.
absolutely, and one reason that I feel envious is that I haven't actually been as gutsy, let's say,
Yeah,
as
yeah, yeah,
Maya in the
absolutely.
novel.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I
Mhm.
mean,
I
I think
myself
none of
haven't
us. Yeah,
haven't myself had the mettle, the guts to strike out on a different path, do
yeah.
something, follow my heart, chuck everything else away, that sort of thing, or to experiment with my life in the way that she does. So in a way, I'm um, doing a bit of wishful thinking over here when I'm writing her as a character. I'm leading a vicarious existence through her, enjoying it in the process as if it were my existence, and
Mm.
then ending up envying her because I really don't have
Yeah, yeah,
uh,
yeah,
that sort of
absolutely.
that
I
sort of thing.
agree. I agree with even with Maya and the kind of choices she takes. It's like, yeah, I mean, at one level, in the end, I mean, you're proud of the character, and you're also
Mm.
like, like leaving is the most difficult act of a human being.
Yes.
Leaving any space, be it your workspace, office, I mean, any moment. To me, I think
Oh,
so. Leaving
absolutely.
and starting
Yeah.
afresh is like it's like superhuman quality, I think.
Right, right. And in fact, that that prompts the thought that my my reaction to meeting Maya would also hinge upon the stage of her journey at which I
Hmm.
meet her.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Now, if I met her midstream, where
Hmm.
she is actually, things are going well for her. She's lapping up all that's coming her way, enjoying it thoroughly. All of this newfound freewheeling, life and exploration and so forth. Uh, so I'd feel envious then. But then later on, as things unravel for her, I mean, they do unravel for her, and she
Yeah.
finds herself towards the end in not such a good space. I'd feel, well, a twang of sympathy for her. I'd feel,
Hmm.
oh, poor you, but at least you tried, at least you lived things out the way that you wish to do, and you actually lived things out in a way that had not been possible for you, that had not been accessible for you. At least you tasted all of that, no
Hmm.
matter that eventually you made up your mind that, well, or others made your mind up for you that that wasn't the space for you.
Hmm.
That's what happens to Maya.
And
Um,
also the time is such, had it been 5 years later for Maya, I don't know
yeah.
whether I'm not disclosing, but her final end would have been slightly different. I
Oh,
mean, I
yes,
don't know.
absolutely. No, no,
10,
you're
20 years
right.
later would,
Oh, you're right. I mean, had I set the novel, let's say, in the time frame that you did, or let's say
yeah.
around the mid 2010s,
Hmm.
2015 or 16, then certainly this sort of unraveling might not have happened.
Yeah.
The
There's
sort of
a
dissipation that happens for her might not have happened. But then, it's something that she also bounces back out of. So
yeah.
on the whole, I'm not. I'm I'm glad enough that I set the novel and in the time frame that I did, and got Maya to go through the kinds of things that she did. That sort of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It is when it was. I mean, the story is where it was meant to be. I think
Absolutely.
nothing can change that.
Absolutely.
I would
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
I also wanted to say to add here with Rohit to have like to write a female protagonist like that. I mean, it's incredible, Rohit. Like really, like to
that's
be and
exactly
not to
what I
stereotype or anything. Male
was.
writing, female writer. I don't want to stereotype, but still, I'm just saying
Oh
that
well.
to get
Yeah,
into
Well,
the subjectivity,
thank
it's
you.
not easy. Like
not even.
I don't want to write another female character for some time right now. I'm like, okay, I want to do something different. So coming to there and getting into that subjectivity, spending so much time with the character, it's really incredible for that you do that. Not
Oh,
many writers do it in India.
thank you.
I
Thank
do
you.
want to
Thank
know,
you.
male writers do it in India. I want to say
Not
that
many. Exactly. That's where
they
I was
don't do it,
coming to
and
you.
no
I
taking names,
wanted
but
to, yeah, I wanted to thank Rohit for also his honesty when he says that, you would have been intimidated by her, threatened by
Mm,
her had you met her before, you had come into your own.
I would.
And, yeah. And then you would
Mm,
envy her. I mean, like Rupleena said, men have not been writing nuanced women characters. And though, in your case, we see a little bit of that. We see that little bit of distance between uh, the narratorial voice and the protagonist. So, for
Right.
example, in Rupleena's case, it's a first person narrative. So, we never
Mm,
get to gaze at there's no male or female gaze at the protagonist. It's her gaze.
mm,
We see the
Yeah.
world through her eyes. So, in your case, I see that little bit of distance.
mm.
This is not a critique, it's just an observation. I
Yes,
see
yes,
that,
and
but
completely.
the way you've done it, I think it's very sensitively done. And I hope more, male writers, um, follow into this because, we have some very beautiful, very nuanced, very moving male characters having been written by women writers.
Right,
Right.
right.
We have some of
Absolutely.
the best male characters which have
Mm,
been created by women
mm.
writers, even
Absolutely.
contemporary Indian women writers. But the
Mm,
vice versa is not true.
perhaps, yeah.
Not
And,
true.
I
And
just,
it's a loss. It's a very big loss. Uh,
perhaps, and, I'd like to first thank you both for your really very kind and generous remarks.
It's
Um,
true. Yeah.
I, it all just then swings on how well you pull it off. I mean, and I don't know how well I've pulled it off. It's for the reader to judge, really, at
Mm.
the end of the day. All I can do is to follow my impulse. And just as I said about the unquenchable sort of urge to write as such, this also was an unquenchable desire, an unquenchable urge to portray this sort of woman. Because I'd been so deeply impressed by this sort of woman
Mm.
in that phase of time. Uh, Honestly, the novel is a tribute to that sort of person.
Mm.
It's a homage
Yeah.
to that sort of woman who takes risks,
Mm.
who breaks free of the conventions that shackle her, and at several stages shows a lot more metal, a lot more sort of grit than the men around her do. That sort of thing. So I
you know,
again thank you very much for those observations, and
Rohit, that is
it's
the voice of an ally.
right,
Yeah.
you're right.
Yeah. Yeah. Correct.
And
Yeah.
it is so important
Yeah.
because
Yeah, that's very well. That's very nicely put. It's a voice of an ally.
whatever we
Mm.
have seen, whatever even whatever we get to read of writings that come in, it's not a very well etched uh, body of literary voices, that of an ally. And I
Mm.
believe that, in the current scenario where um, the right has taken to too much right,
Mm.
and of course, women's rights are suffering. I mean, there's no two ways about that. But when
Mm-hmm.
men don't know where they stand anymore,
Yeah.
okay, even the ones who are on the far right, they will thump their chest, they will shout and sloganeer, but they don't know about the ground beneath their feet. And
Mm.
then, there are those people who are, on a series of left, on the spectrum of left from the right. And they themselves don't know where they are standing, what they're supposed to do, who they
Mm.
are anymore. And it's such a scenario, having the voice of an ally, either in the form of a narratorial voice or in the form of a character's voice, I
Mhm.
think it's sort of important, you know. So
Right.
it's a
Right.
lot for that. And, let's now move to the male characters.
Mhm.
Uh, Rohit has not been very kind to the men in his novel, I feel. He has been much kinder and much more generous to Maya. I don't know, Rohit, you tell me.
I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. I
But Ruplina,
Yeah,
your
well,
characters, the
yeah.
characters
I
that you
think
have created, I mean, like, yeah, they are, I mean, they are fully fledged and they have their issues. But tell us about the men who are populating these novels, the characters that you've created.
well, first of all, I don't agree. I think Rohit has been kind, fairly okay. I mean, he's. I mean, he whatever. I mean, he has to keep his distance, to be an ally. Also, there are things he has to do as a writer. I think,
you're
I,
right. You're right. Yes.
you cannot. He
Yes.
cannot do that. I mean, and also, I mean, I just sorry taking off from that to admit that you are envy. One can be envious and all. It's a huge thing to admit that as a writer and as a man writing a woman. So I think it's wonderful, and that's what probably shows off in the sensitivity of your writing, like the character, I think. So
Thank you for that
yeah.
as well. Yeah, no, certainly, one needs to keep that distance, because, well, you need to observe, as you said, Rupleena, earlier in this conversation, you need to observe and to set down in the writing the flaws as well of the person that you actually deeply admire, but you can see that there are,
Hmm.
there are foibles over there.
Yeah, yeah,
There are these flaws. There are the usual human infirmities.
yeah.
So Maya, for instance, has along the way develops a kind of sense of hubris, which then
Hmm.
cuts the ground from under her feet.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm. Hmm.
she can't sort of prevent that from happening, but she has a certain sense of where she is intellectually, the plane that she inhabits intellectually, and then from there she looks down upon those, including one of her lovers. She looks down upon him as not being intellectual enough for her, not
Hmm.
being
Hmm.
commensurately sensitive and
Hmm.
intellectual. And he, in fact, happens to be the one who is most ardently in love with her, and
Hmm. Hmm.
who
Hmm.
who
Yeah.
might, just
Yeah.
make the best,
Hmm.
longish term sort of partner for her, but
Suitor. Yeah.
she cast him aside for that reason. So there are these sorts of things also, a certain amount of hubris, a certain amount of insensitivity. And if one doesn't have that distance, then one isn't any longer, I think, an ally. One just becomes a devotee. One becomes an
Hmm.
unquestioning fan.
Hmm.
To use today's language, as Smita brought up, the political leanings of
Hmm.
the day, one becomes a bhakt, and one doesn't wish
Hmm.
to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm
No, no, but
sorry.
I meant about the men characters.
No, yeah,
Uh,
no, no.
I did,
So that's
I
what.
did say you have not been kind to Maya. I said you've not been as kind to the men
yeah,
character,
yeah.
male.
That,
Smita, you did say that. I'm very sorry. I went off on a tangent, and that
No,
was in
that's okay.
response.
This is your
no, no.
conversation. You
I,
go
I,
any tangent you wish. This
Yeah.
is
I
your
hand this back
conversation.
to Rupleena with due apologies for having snatched away those five
No,
minutes.
no, not at all. No, I don't know. I have been told that you only see the male characters from the uh, narrator's perspective, which is exactly the device of the novel.
Yeah.
Because and that's something which was a conscious device, for me, because I had written a draft of a third-person novel, and it was at that moment where I needed to rework the draft, and at that point, and that's when the pandemic came play took I mean I the 2020, it was 2020, and I suddenly felt that the world is so different right now, and do I even want to go back to that novel and do that draft, redo that, edit that draft, or do I just want to write something completely afresh about the world, and that 2020, which is why I look, I go back on this decade, like it was a decade was ending at that point of time, and that was my first thought, and my thought was that I've just finished a third person draft. I don't want one novel to overlap with the other whenever I go back to it. So for me, I had to have a first person narrative. So it was very clear that it has to be a first person narrative. It has to be a contemporary woman. And obviously, you see all the men. By the way, love the male characters. I love both Nikhil and Zafar. So essentially, it's like this young woman, and the world that is unfolding, the larger political world and personal world, which is clashing, and also like these two men that she's in a way constantly confused with, or basically the two men who also symbolize multiple cities, weather, seasons, and the decade which she crosses with them, and her own like mistakes. So in that sense, of course, you see the men through her eyes. There is no first person of the male characters, but there has been no first person of female characters for ages, like forever you have the first person narratives which are only about one person's subjectivity, and however flawed that subjectivity, that's the story, that's the narrative. So for me, it was like, maybe Nikhil and Zafar have their own story. Maybe Nikhil and Zap are fabulous, and they have their own story to tell, but the protagonist, the narrator, is not going to tell that story. We will look at it at some other point and space. So for me, that was a very clear choice. So even when I thought that I should I should do more justice to them. I just realized that how much justice do we do in our singular objectivity? You
But I
can be
think those
slightly
are
objective.
very, very beautifully edged out characters. There's no lack of depth or complexity in them.
I
But we
agree.
only see
Yes, there's
see
one
it through her. They
perspective.
could be
Oh,
nice.
that's fine.
Yeah,
There's one
yeah,
perspective, but you can tell
yeah.
that, and she looks at them with a fair bit of warmth.
She does. Yeah, yeah, yeah. She
So,
does. Yeah, yeah,
so, so they're also very close examinations of these men.
yeah, yeah.
And there's also this likability that transfers to the reader, that comes across to the reader.
Well, I'm glad because several people
That
did
closeness.
tell me that you could have been nicer to the male characters. So I said yes, maybe yeah, maybe in another book I'll make up, but in this one, it's hers. It's her story to tell, and that's where she is.
So, no, I want
So
to ask you before I move back to Rohit, is what do you think women writers do differently when they are writing male characters than the men themselves?
I don't think it's about the difference. It's also about the perception of the reader towards towards the woman writer. Because, like, look at Dickens, for example, or like wonderful writer. I mean, if I'm looking at classics, it's actually a very difficult question. It's not easy to answer it at one go. But if I think of, say, George Eliot, uh, wonderful, and these are the people which I've read, and that observational tone, and the fact that you're looking at class and you're looking at person and you're looking at the at those people vis-a-vis their class. A lot of male writers and women writers, all of them do. It's just that somehow a perception, the reader's perception of the text changes when the names differ. I
So I
think
think I
that's what
think
I
I'm also
felt.
asking about the female gaze. I think I should have
Female gaze is softer.
crafted it different. Yes. So I want to
I
talk,
think it
I
just
want you to tell us a little
uh,
bit about that. The female gaze on men, when
yeah.
the woman looks at the man. I want you to talk a little bit about that.
um I don't know. It's a very, very sort of nuanced question, which I honestly have not thought about.
Okay.
But when I see Virginia Woolf, for example, or a prime example is, of course, like Virginia Woolf herself, who's some of her male characters are wonderful. I love those male characters, which you see them through the subjectivity of the female. But there's a slant. I think there's something about the slanting eye. It's the same reason why, like, a Sofia Coppola film, I'm jumping, but Lost in Translation has that softness about both the man and the woman in this amazing way. Because I think you come with a lot of things about which is social. Obviously, gender is socialized, and you come with a lot of vulnerabilities which you are not scared to put on film or on paper. I think that changes the gaze. If a man is also willing to put away, it's pretty much
Yeah.
maybe the same effect
Thanks
can
for
be
that.
reached.
That's very, very beautiful and very thought provocative. And
I think
Rohit,
Rohit.
my question to you is, I think, slightly even more difficult because you have done a balancing act of both the male gaze and the female gaze. The way men, for example, look at Maya is your classic male gaze, right? But then this is
Hmm.
Maya's story. And Maya is also looking at men
Yes.
and the rest
All
of
the-
the world. Tell me how you did it. Tell me how did you differentiate these gazes when you were writing? And how did you write? Did you write on different days? What did you do?
Again, an extremely searching question, Smita. I'll just say this that I knew that someone like Maya, were I to be portraying someone like Maya, that she'd attract all sorts of gazes, all sorts of male gazes. Uh, Now, if I put myself in the position of my own younger self, like I said, I'd feel menaced by someone like Maya. Today, I wouldn't feel menaced. I'd feel envious and so on and so forth. But then this kind of a thing can happen with, let's say, a bunch of men. Some who feel threatened, intimidated, and some who actually admire the qualities that someone like Maya possesses. So amongst the men, for example, who feel threatened by her in the novel is is this rather pompous, self-regarding functionary of the center where she works, who's called the pontiff, and that's because he likes to make these pontificating
Pontific.
statements all the time. So he actually, he is ambivalent, deeply ambivalent towards Maya because he admires her, he wants her approbation, and yet at the same time, um, he cannot, for the life of him, work out what kind of woman she is, and whether she's the sort of woman that he even ought to be, um, let's see, on equal terms with. So he actually wants her admiration as much as he admires her. He wants her admiration, and that's the whole thing about the male ego. That
Right.
very often you might admire a woman, but you also wish to have admiration in return, perhaps a greater degree of admiration. If that isn't forthcoming, then you do whatever you do. But in this case, what he does, the pontiff does, is to undermine Maya, is to make life miserable for her at the center. You know,
Yes.
um, in fact, bring her working life at the center to an end, because he becomes a boss, and then he does all sorts of underhand things to get her out of the way, because she is not falling in line, she is not paying obeisance to him as he feels she ought to. And Smita, you're right. Maya's world is populated with men, for the reason that she finds men now to be at least equally good company, if not better company than women. So she gets on extremely well with the person who's called the big boy, who's her boss before the pontiff takes over, and she gets on like a house on fire with him. And that is because he, even though he's a boss, has the same sorts of traits that she has, and he echoes a lot of her qualities. One of those is irreverence. So Maya adores this quality of irreverence because that's another sort of quality that she's found exists in her and that was previously suppressed. And her boss embodies this sort of irreverence, not just towards the world at large, but towards himself as well. So he doesn't take himself very seriously. He doesn't take his position very seriously, and that is, rare, I suppose, in especially a kind of center of technology and economics, the sort of thing that I've described in the novel, where
Yeah, yeah,
men tend to take themselves all the more seriously
yeah,
because
yeah.
it's a male-dominated universe,
Yeah.
and they are the powers unto themselves and so on. And then so she does actually get on really, really well with him because of all this. And then there are the lovers, as I've said, one of whom she looks down upon intellectually, the other one that she looks up to intellectually, but who then betrays her. Then that's what sort of gets her thinking about the kind of life she's leading, and so forth. So the way that I approached all of this was to say, well, uh, I've seen these sorts of people. I've seen men who are deeply insecure about themselves. I've also seen men who are secure in who they are and will, uh, you know, uh, give due admiration to women without expecting that in return. I've also seen men who string women along and then betray them towards the end. You know, and when I say that I've seen men do all these sorts of things, and then I've seen women also who then
Absolutely.
deal with these sorts of things. So Maya, in fact, is as Rupleena also said in other words before this. Maya is also a composite character. She's made up of elements of many women that I've observed during that time. Not one single woman, but
Yeah.
the males in the novel are actually more limited. They're more confined in the sense they're modeled more closely on one type of man or the other.
Right.
Um, so I wanted in this novel to really speak about the kinds of male gaze that a woman can encounter and how she then responds to each of those gazes that fall upon her. Uh, and again, it's to do with capturing, this sort of woman in that sort of space and time, capturing this sort of woman, and saying, well, what are the sorts of thoughts that would, let's say, get triggered, get spurred by this sort of lover, by this sort of boss that she has. It's workspace as well as her private life space. So I'm exploring both. And again, Smita, I just hope that I've been able to pull it off, that I've been able to write in a somewhat persuasive way about
You have.
the sorts of things that happen.
Of course you have.
Well, thank you. That it's a big relief to hear that sort of thing, because one is never sure. One is really, really never sure. It's a risk that one is taking, and one hopes that one can bring it off at the end.
No, certainly. All right. Sure. May I request both of you to now read some excerpts from your respective novels? Show us the book, and
Oh,
yes, such a gorgeous cover. It's such a gorgeous cover.
Oh,
thank you.
It invites you in. I mean, into the bed, into that room, and into the novel.
Thank you. Well, actually, this photograph is, this by this wonderful photographer, Akshay Mahajan. And and somehow it just anyway, it's a long story, another story about how it went. But so that's what.
You can tell us the story. Please tell us the story.
No, I mean, in the sense that it's just that I wanted a photograph, on the cover. So there was, and somehow I loved Akshay's work. And then I think my partner suggested, why don't you look at his photographs? And then he said, what is the, what is this? I said, of course, you can take any of my photographs. And what is the story? Then I told him a little bit, and he said, okay, let me send you a set. So, and somehow this one just stuck out, and it was not meant to be. It was something else which was meant to be. But no, none of us, be it me and then Shadab, who's done the cover at Penguin, he also got stuck with that image, and just and without any private internal consultation, this cover came out of that whole set of, everybody chose it on their own.
That's very interesting because, then what that photo has done is that this is no longer a cover, it's a window,
Yeah. So completely honest, because I remember seeing the set and I was like, oh my God, this is so beautiful. Let me see, I'll talk to him. And just by chance, it was not one of the initial photographs I'd chosen from Akshay's set, but he sent it and it went across and they picked it up and then it just happened. So, yeah.
That's lovely. Yeah.
Lovely story.
What a lovely sort of chance occurrence.
Yeah. And that's what. I never thought it would have this kind of this intimate, and it just felt that, oh, this is the cover. So,
read us something from your book, Rupleena.
Oh God, I was hoping Rohit will do this first.
Rohit, would you like to go first? It's completely both of you.
It's fine. I think Rupleena has already got a page open, so she might as well.
That's a bookmark. I did keep it open. Happens. I'll just read this very small section, and then I'll just. Yeah. Nikhil and Zap were film directors. Zap directed stage plays and films. Nikhil was trained as a cinematographer and directed films. That spring, Zap had just moved back to Calcutta after a few years of trying to permanently live in Germany. Calcutta was also Nikhil's hometown. Zap did not speak about his reason of moving back, but I remember Nikhil telling me that the Art Council, which had promised funding for Zap's long-term stay, had backed off. I heard them speak of everything except Germany and understood that both of them did not like to speak about their disappointments or betrayals. Nikhil told me about Zap's work when we were in a taxi on our way to Zap's house. I was looking at the rear view mirror and wearing my 307 orange organza lipstick. The orange was like the flame of the winter fire made by the security guards huddled during Delhi winters. I rolled it twice on my lips. The taxi driver looked underage to drive. He was so thin, he could barely fill the large bucket seat. He tried to get a conversation out of Nikhil, the kind of conversation that gave a semblance of class equality. But Nikhil did not relent in these situations. I tried to make up for Nikhil's abruptness like I usually did. The driver had to drop us at the entrance of the lane where Zap lived. where a crowd of people stood waiting. He told us helpfully that it was for a temple that had a good rumor network of wish fulfillment. He said he knew of someone who got a job after years of unemployment, only when he had tied a thread at the temple. I had read in the papers that for one peon's post at a government office, 8,000 postgraduate candidates had applied. Merit seemed like an illusion that only belonged to the privileged. I remember reading somewhere that students had stood in the sun for 8 hours to collect a form for a coaching center. One of them died of a heat stroke. Two fell very ill. Did the rest get through to the college? They must have all prayed. So I was telling you about Zap. Nikhil cleared his throat like he did when he said what he did not intend to actually say. Zap started directing stage plays only when he was in college. He was invited to take over a big musical production of Alice in Wonderland by the British theatre company that wanted to bring the most expensive theatre experience to India. Zap hated the idea, but he wanted to move out of Calcutta, Nikhil added. Anyway, that was a decade back. Zap moved from theatre into films and is now back in Calcutta. He will probably work through both art forms. Can you believe he barely visited Calcutta the decade he was abroad? Nikhil continued the conversation while we passed the queue of people waiting to make their wish. I had not seen any play or film made by Zap, but I had been told that he had been making films since he was 15. They had shown at all the film festivals in Berlin, New York, and Sydney. You should know that Zap is very good at making people do exactly what he wants them to do. He is known to be a very manipulative human being. An hour later, sitting in Zap's house, I understood why Nikhil wanted me to hear those words. It was like the warning sent out by weather departments to fishermen after the cyclone had descended over the ocean.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's what I mean. That's what reading makes you end up reading too much, or that's
But
where
not too
I'm
much.
always very.
It
Yeah.
was a beautiful, beautiful selection, a beautiful excerpt. Thank you.
No,
And
thank you so
I'm
much.
glad that you read a bit that had both Zap and Nikhil in
Yeah,
it,
yeah,
because I
yeah,
think you again through your protagonist, her eyes, you draw some really interesting contrasts between these two.
these two. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
that
mean,
passage comes back to me quite vividly, where a small passage where you say how Nikhil, when entering a room or something like that, would wish all the attention to be on himself and would
yeah,
wish to assert himself as well, whereas
yeah,
Zap
yeah.
excels at making people be at their ease more, and
Yeah. That's an idea.
open up to him,
Uh,
things like that. So it's the lovely contrast between those characters in your novel.
yeah. Well, thank you. Yeah.
All right, this is towards the end of the novel, where Maya, fed up with the way things have panned out in Bombay, just leaves the city and goes off to one of these down to earth, so to speak, camps, where these sorts of retreats that had started coming up in those days, where you could go and live in a sort of mission or a camp in the middle of nowhere, get your fingers dirty with the soil, and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
So she then, over there, she's thinking back to her life in Bombay and wondering whether how much she misses that, what elements she misses of it. And so I'll just read a little bit to do with that. Curiously, on a purely biophysical level, she clocks a sense of reprieve. From her fingertips is effaced the remorseless, sticky percussion of keyboards. From her eyes, the sandpaper of electronic screens and e-documents to be pored over and over again. It's a species of purgatory she seems to have entered, a sanatorium for the senses as much as for the psyche. And the reason she's thinking this is because at this camp, as at many such places, the use of electronic devices is forbidden. So, she's
Yeah.
got this complete reprieve. And then you build yourself an enclave, she tells herself, populated with things, notions, and people that you care for, wherever you happen to be. To a degree, you become the enclave you build. In Bombay, she had yesterday's enclave. Here she has today's. And slowly but surely, today's enclave is nudging yesterday's away. Or perhaps not. She's thought often of yesterday's India and today's India, and how the latter never really supplants the former, but is layered over it, and is imperfectly layered, so that shades and glimpses of yesterday's India keep shining through, as in the palimpsest scene on newly layered roads. Here too, it may be no different. Today's life space, today's Maya, she feels, may look as if they're nudging yesterday's away. But there are these layers, and yesterday's life space and yesterday's Maya are ever present and in all kinds of ways that will keep coloring today's. That's, I think, where I'll stop.
It's wonderful. It's very philosophical. I must say, it reminded me of those, there was when this Vipassana, Igatpuri and all of these things, it just it came up when I that whole moment. Also the farming communities where people would go up, like what you say about this retreat also,
Right.
And set up a farm. What was it? Near Pune, I'm just forgetting.
Yes, there were several that came up then in Madhya Pradesh, in Karnataka.
Close to Pune, I think, where,
Absolutely. And they were less restrictive than, let's say, Vipassana centers. Vipassana centers are really quite regimental in the kind of discipline they enforce on you. But here you are supposed to just remove yourselves from the cares of the urban world. And I think they are probably in more demand today than they were then.
Correct,
They were newfangled then. But they cater to this sort of breakaway instinct, I suppose.
That was a beautiful excerpt, Rohit. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much.
And the idea of the palimpsest, the idea of old India, new India, the continuity of time during which Maya's story happens, I think it sort of brings all of those things together, this excerpt. So thank you for reading that. And okay, so
My pleasure.
I think, is there any advice you would like to give to up and coming authors, writers who are trying to write? How should they approach their character building? How should they situate their characters in the setting that they choose to write?
Rupleena.
No, I also want to say one last thing. Sorry, that also the metaphor of enclave, the way it comes. I remember reading when I was. It comes really nicely. When the way you also look, and actually we didn't speak enough of the city in Rohit's in the enclave, or like the whole the city, the way it comes in the novel. I think that's probably another conversation only. I think like 1 hour conversation, but here also the way the enclave itself, what it comes, and the metaphor of this whole cocoons and closets you're trying to run away from, and they become you. I think that's also something which is very fascinating for for someone to read. And I think to add to that, I would say linking that with character building, or for young writers, for not young, old, across ages, time, anything.
Aspiring writers, no matter
whatever. Therefore, for somebody who's yet to publish, maybe like I would say that I think that really works about looking at something, the world around you philosophically, and finding that one metaphor, that something which stands for something really small, which is probably stands for something bigger. I think that's a very good starting point to have. That's what I feel. That's how I look at it. Like, something which is like a microcosm of of something which you don't quite understand, but you also have to have, as a writer, have to have the faith that you will get there. You will answer the question. I think, to me, sometimes you need to start with a question, and eventually, obviously, I'm also a research person. I have a doctorate, so the research question is something that you begin with. But it's a good exercise for a writer as well, that to have that metaphor, to have that question, and somewhere the twain will meet, I think. I don't know. And also with character development, you just have to spend a lot of time with them. And somewhere you need to shut out the world, privately or visibly or invisibly. You do it like, a lot of us do it like invisibly. Nobody knows that what you're thinking, but your mind is elsewhere. You're doing your course, your mind, you're like neck deep into domesticity, but your mind is elsewhere. I mean, that's my way at least. But so then the arc will develop, because people, if you see them for a substantial period of time, be it 24 hours, every skin, you notice their hair inch, the way they are twitching, the way they are getting unnerved by certain thing, it will come to you. You will have the graph, 24 hours, 24 years, 10 years, it's out there when you begin that person, begin that journey with that character. I think that's what I would say. I think.
Thank you, Rupleena. That makes sense. Rohit?
Uh, yes, I sort of take off from where Rupleena left, and the thought comes to me that there are distinct types of characters that one can write about, and there are distinct reasons for picking a type. What I mean by that is that one sort of character that one can have as a protagonist, let's say, is oneself, is one's own psyche disguised as a character in fiction and so forth. And the principal reason for doing that, a lot of people do that, of course. A lot has been done with that sort of thing. The semi-autobiographical mode of writing. One of the reasons I find that I would do that is to explain myself to myself. There have been times where I haven't been able to, for example, explain my actions, my thoughts and my actions to myself, and I've always pondered over them in the future. And when I look back on those times, I wondered, well, why on earth did I do such a fatuous thing, or why did I do such an absolutely silly thing, or think in such a way? And writing about that, I think, uncovers the reasons for which one was like that in that time. So that's one reason that people, I think, do this sort of character writing. And that is, I think, well, a little bit easier because you're speaking to yourself, really. Through the medium of your protagonist, you're having a conversation with yourself. The other kinds of characters are where you get fascinated by people around you. You get fascinated by their choices, by their decisions as to how they conduct themselves. And you then wish to explore the reasons as to why they do that. Then you really have to spend more time, as Rupleena was saying, you really have to spend more time, get under the skin of those characters, try and figure out exactly what's driving them in some direction or the other, or in some pattern of behavior. And what I would say is, for instance, with someone like Maya, who is a character that I've had to inhabit, I've never really been a person of that kind, let alone a woman. I've never even been a person of that kind, as I was saying previously. So there, I really have to try and make sure that from one chapter to another of the novel, she is consistent unto herself. That if let's say, taking a rather high-handed view of things, if I've endowed her with some qualities, with a certain psyche, then any conversation she has with any of these people that she knows, or any of the thoughts that she has about them or about the situation that she's in, ought to be consonant with her own psyche. It can't jar with the sort of person that I've laid out for the reader. So her actions, her thoughts need to be consistent throughout. That's one thing that I think one has to take care of. But as far as advice is concerned, Smita, I think it's a very dangerous thing to give advice. I wouldn't presume to do that ever. All I would say is that you need to think about the kind of character that you wish to portray, and then think about the sorts of qualities that you wish to bestow on them. Like I was saying, and one of the things that comes to me is a conversation that I had recently that was very interesting, and that was to do with how stringently does one constrain one's characters. By which I mean, I've heard it said that once I've created a character, I've heard a writer being quoted on this, once I've created a character, I leave them to themselves. They evolve, and I do the writing for them. So they're out of my control, um, and I'm just, the medium through which they grow in the novel. And the other view to take is that you lay down the character in his or her entirety, almost, and you are in strict and stringent control of how they evolve. It's not as if they're uh, they're autonomous of you, and then you're just writing things down as they occur to you. But you are in control, and you make them do the kinds of things that you wish them to do, so that it suits your narrative. Now, I myself can't decide which of these is the better course to take. There could be other courses to take as well, but certainly in the instance of the Enclave and in Maya's instance, I've taken the latter course. That is, I've conceived of this woman. I've conceived of her outlook on life, of her worldview on things, and then I've constrained her because of that, because now everything has to be consistent with her psyche, with her worldview, with her persona. So she's under, under my thumb, so to speak, throughout the narrative. But then the other approach, where you let the character sort of fly off into the unknown and you just track them. Who knows? That might also be equally rewarding and equally interesting to do.
Yeah, it's very, very interesting to hear the former and the latter. I want to add that, while I didn't know, I didn't think about it, but I think when I write the first draft, I do the former. Then when I go back to it and go back draft after draft, I do the latter. That would be, yeah. Now that you say it, because you spelled it out and described it so well, now I understand my own process, I think. So,
Best of both.
I
Best of
noticed
both
that.
I think.
Noticed that in Rupleena, your work, that you are actually following the character.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also because sometimes, as Rohit said, that every character, every story needs a different, like for me, it has to be one decade. So there has to be a progression. So if I didn't do it every day, or if I did do a section, and then move on to the next, then the decades, then consistency would not be there. Like somebody has to change. But even for that person to change, the elements have to change, a lot of things. So using for 10 years, I mean, if it's like, say, 6 months, I mean, every story needs its own this thing. So I needed to follow the country and the character, I think, at that in that year. But like the latter part, that latter style is what I do when I'm doing the edits. Like I'm like, okay, get in the box now, kind of thing. No more flying, no more flying, I think.
Rohit, that was very, very, lucidly and accessibly put, I think. Even as a writer, as an editor, I mean, I take away a lot from the two processes that you mentioned, because like Rupleena, I didn't realize that these were two different things. And we all do these. We all do these, intuitively to some degree or the other. So thanks. It might not be advice, but it is, it's a great share of your process. So thank you for that. Are there any books or authors or characters that you are currently reading that you would like to share, by other authors, new or old, Indian or global?
Yeah, I'm very curious what Rohit is reading. I'm gonna like steal tomorrow.
Such a delicate way of palming it off on me. I like that. I'm even more interested in what you have to say, but I'll just take this opportunity to talk about some that have really that have stayed with me. Let's say. I think the true test of the delineation or the etching out of a character is how long they stay with you, and whether they keep coming back, not to haunt you really. That's too, I think, grand, plangent a word, but they keep visiting you. They keep knocking on the door of your mind and saying, think back to me. So they, well, there are so many, so I'll have to be really, really, I suppose, random in this and just pick out a few. In V.S. Naipaul's House for Mr. Biswas, it is Mr. Biswas, and what a fantastic journey Naipaul describes in that novel. It's an odyssey, really. and how very sensitively it's done. One really feels as if one is just Mr. Biswas when one is reading that, from beginning to end. I loved, although I know that it's a little esoteric at times, the way it's done, but I love James Joyce's Ulysses for the same reason. It's such a complex character, and through that single day, so much is said about him and about the world around him, and so forth. That again is a character that has just embedded itself in my mind for eternity, as far as eternity goes. And then there is amongst more contemporary writers, I would say Shaikat Majumdar's, the mother of the boy in his novel The Firebird. So Ori is the boy, his mother is the thespian, the stage person, the actor, and she has stayed with me, partly because of the rather tragic story that that Shaikat writes for her. There is, in a slightly different vein, Amit Chaudhary's Nirmalya in his novel The Immortals. There, I mean, that character is so very full of interiority. That's what I really liked about that novel. That tremendous interiority where something or the other takes place, and then there are these reflections on Nirmalya's part, and often rather somber reflections. Would it be better not to have been born at all? That kind of thing. So it's nice to see how those juxtapositions are made between the worldview that he inhabits and the thoughts the events that trigger off his thoughts. I don't know. I mean, I could go on, but perhaps I should hand over to Rupleena, and if we have more time, I could return to a few others.
It's very difficult to pick. This whole did you say favorite writers, influence? What was the exact?
Any one that comes to your mind, right?
Oh, one, there's so many, and for me, I teach literature, so anyway, I'm constantly, but so, crowded with writers and novels, but of course they're favorites. And I would say James Joyce for me again is someone that Ulysses is something which I really enjoyed. I know people everybody laughs when you say that, but both Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man and Ulysses are something I there's so much to understand about form, observation, form. I think it's a whole study in itself. I very much enjoy Virginia Woolf and George Eliot, also because I do a lot of close reading of these novels because I've taught them for many years, quite a few years. So both the novels are something I tremendously enjoy. Writers who I love Orhan Pamuk. Museum of Innocence is something that I really love. And even Snow, but one of my favorite novels of all times is actually Museum of Innocence. The other is new writer who I really love is Rachel Cusk. She actually breaks down the novel form completely, and I'm hypnotized by her writing, when I pick up her book, I can't stop, and I have to stop because I know if this gets over, I don't know what I'll read, it becomes I feel that, okay, that's me, is a feeling I get. Deborah Levy is the other writer I hugely enjoy. And Elena Ferrante, of course, everybody loves that My Brilliant Friend series. Who else? Indian writers. Amitabh Ghosh also. I really love Amitabh Ghosh's Shadow Lines. I taught Vikram Seth last time, Suitable Boy, and I enjoyed Suitable Boy. I mean, I've read Suitable Boy ages ago, and I sort of read it now. And who else? I like Patrick Modiano, for example, this French writer. He has this very noir style of walking through the city and writing, which I tremendously like. I love Paul Auster, in fact, which his novels are one of my favorites. And Indian writers, I said, Vikram Seth. I remember reading, what is the recent Indian writer I read? I read Avni Doshi, and I really enjoyed her novel, actually. And yeah, there's so many. It's very, very difficult. Ovi Vijayan is somebody I very, very love. I love Ovi Vijayan's Legends of Kasak, like magic realism, Kerala, the way it's sort of
Yeah,
weaved in
it's
together.
fantastic.
It's a fantastic novel. I think
Yeah,
it's one of my favorite novels, Legends of Kasak, and also the whole idea of karma, and yet not yet not right in political, the whole left. It's quite brilliantly done. It's a novel to learn a lot from, I think. Ovi
yeah.
Vijayan.
I'm
Yeah.
so glad you mentioned it because O.V. Vijayan's, that another novel of his has left perhaps even a deeper impression on me, which is The Infinity of Grace.
Yeah. It's
Oh,
it's darker. To me, I found it even more dark.
it is
Like,
darker.
yeah,
Mm.
than
It is
Legends of
darker.
Kazakh. Yeah.
It's shorter and it brings in all the elements that you were speaking of. And, one of the things, Smita, that, you spoke of characters in novels and it set me thinking, well, place is also a character in novels.
Absolutely.
Can be and can be a very strong character. So I've enjoyed certain novels for the reason that they've so very powerfully and unforgettably evoked certain places for me. Amongst contemporary ones, there is Jane Borges's Bombay Balchao. It's a lovely novel set in the Christian, precincts of southern Bombay. And likewise, there are others of that kind where the place itself becomes the dominant character, and everything that happens there is in fact determined by the setting. So it's that bunch of characters in a closed community, and they're entirely sort of entrained and enwrapped in that small world, and all of their thoughts, actions are decided by the smallness of where they live, and which is in fact actually a very large universe. And I think Rupleena said that right at the start, that even though you pick up certain types of people for your characters, they are everybody. They are actually everybody in the world around us. And these small spaces can also be, well, metaphors for the entire world. And I've loved novels of that kind as well. Um, so yeah, there are too many to count, really, too many to list.
No,
But these are the sorts of
that's
things that
fair.
I've
But
liked in them.
these are exhaustive lists. Even
Hmm.
for me, I haven't read some of the writers. So thanks so
Yeah.
much for sharing that. And we are almost at the close of our
Hmm.
conversation. And, I mean, we can go on, of course.
Then we'll go on
Uh,
forever. It
we can
doesn't
go
like.
on. That is the joy of literature, right? When I
Yeah.
mean, literally,
Absolutely.
conversation should ideally never
Yeah.
end,
Never end.
right? But
Yeah.
before we sort of bring this to a conclusion, the final thing I would like to ask both of you is there a message or an observation on Usawa, the team of Usawa, or is there a message for the readers of Usawa that you would like to share?
Um, yeah, certainly. I think one of the things, like, you are, I mean, it's a very interesting name that you have. And B, I think that the fact that you're out there saying that we're a feminist literary journal without bothering about things, nobody says it anymore. I think it's almost as if, like, you don't want to say, oh no, we're just like this thing. But here you're like, okay, we are this, like, deal with it. I think that is something which is wonderful, because you have to have something which is, I mean, feminism is not just like a side concern. No? It's something which is like, I mean, it's, I don't know, it's a window, prism. Uh, it's something through which you look everything, you can see everything through it, and it just makes a different kind of a sense. It gives a different kind of a meaning. So it's wonderful that it is a feminist literary journal, and also, of course, the fact that you have fiction, non-fiction, and all of those things, and the fact that there really needs to be more and more literary journals in the world, because there's just not enough, particularly for India. From India, it's just never enough. I think there was a real lacune out there, at least to my knowledge, at least. Yeah. So I
Thank
think
you,
it's like
Lena. Thank
wonderful.
you.
Yeah.
Do send us some of your writings. We would be honored to publish them.
Yes, sure. Yeah, I will.
Rohit,
Yes, well, I've somewhere or the other said this before, but I'm profoundly impressed by the way that Usawa was thought up and then set up, and now how it's thriving. It's extremely impressive because it's not easy to do. I know that it's not easy to do. Sustaining a journal of such quality over a period of time.
Yeah.
And now I think Usawa has been around, Smita, remind me, for 3 or 4
7 years.
years.
7 years. Yeah.
7 years.
Yeah.
So,
Just yeah. It's
and they
amazing.
have the very best quality of writing
Yeah.
enshrined in Usawa. Right from the start, somehow, and I would like to know how you were able to, get the very best talents around the place to write for you. And of course, as Rupleena was saying, the great thing about it is that it is through the lens or through the prism of feminism, but you don't confine yourself to that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you're broader than that as well. You have space for all sorts of voices, so long as they're coherent and lively and interesting. So, congratulations to all of you. I don't know how you do it, honestly.
That's
It's
true. It must be like a massive labor of love and
yeah,
time and everything. I mean, we know how difficult it is. It's like
yeah.
absolutely, particularly in India with lack of state funding, and there's just like such little support for literature, and it's just brilliant,
Yeah,
I
it's
guess. I
completely
don't know.
self-funded, and only this year we have built a team. And yes, thank you so much for your appreciation. And the fact that what Rupleena said about feminism being siloed, that was a very big problem that I had with this idea. The academics are in their own silo.
Hmm.
The people, the social workers or the NGOs, they are in their own silo. And then with my own study of feminism, I realized because I'm not an academic, I'm not coming from academia. So I realized that, it was more the lens. And no, I mean, if I had my way, I wouldn't say that feminism is a part of a literary course or anything. I think
Hmm.
what is mainstream and
Hmm.
what is feminism, I have a problem that they are not reconciling.
Hmm.
Uh,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, they should merge into each other as a narrative.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes. And so, for example, we are trying to do like these special issues also. We have a sister magazine called the Matchbox now. So we did a special issue on the Northeast literature of India in May. We are doing a special issue which will be out next month on Afghan women writers' voices. I mean, it's completely written, it'll only carry writings by Afghan women. Next year, we are trying to do some other special issues. So, and why we want to keep it broad is um, because I don't want, I mean, at some point we have to stop differentiating between feminism and life. So this is towards that dream.
I'd just like to say, thank you very much for putting all this together. I know
Yeah,
it
thank
takes
you
a
so
lot of
much.
effort behind the scenes as well. Thank you, Smita. Thank you to your team. And honestly, congratulations on
Yeah.
this wonderfully conceived journal, magazine, whatever, and on sustaining it. And you said that it's self-funded, so that it's not just a labor of love. It's
It's
it's also a sacrifice that you're
yeah,
making for literature at
yeah.
large, which is so very uncommon to come across. I do really hope that you can be sort of self-sustaining through external funding as well now. Let's hope for the very best on that front. Fingers crossed.
Thank you.
I
Thank,
know that you're making
Yeah.
making your approaches here and there. Do hope they bear fruit.
thank you. Thank you.